You should be fighting for it. You should have access to clean water, no matter who you are, where you live. Did you know that not all Italian cities and towns have access to clean water? This might sound shocking to you, especially if you come from Finland. I wasn't planning on talking about this topic specifically until someone, and I will show you the conversation up here, mentioned it. Because they said, I miss Finnish water. And yes, me too. This was a discussion in the comment section of my reverse culture shocks video. If you missed that one and the culture shocks one that I made when I was still in Finland, so the point of view of an Italian moving to Finland, watch them. But this one is more specific because, yes, I did notice some changes in water once I moved back here, and I don't remember this being so blatant when I moved back to Italy after staying in other places. And I will get to that in a minute. But first, yes, Finnish water and Italian water, and we are specifically talking about the water that you can drink from your tap at home, they're different. I remember when I first moved to Finland, probably the first month, I was staying in a B&B, so I thought maybe it's this specific place that has this thing. But no, I noticed it throughout my entire stay, so for 5 years. The smell of water was different, and the smell of the water that you used in the toilet was different. I cannot tell you exactly how, but there was something. And the first times I drank the water from the tap in a house or apartment in Finland, it didn't taste like anything. And you might think, yes, of course, it shouldn't taste like anything. It's water. Yet, Italian water, or at least the one that I'm familiar with, because the one that I drank the most is in Trieste. In Trieste, water is way heavier. It has more minerals, and more than anything, it's filled with limescale. And that's what I wrote in the comments, because yes, that's the most obvious thing that I noticed coming back is the residue of this limescale in my kettle. I mean, it's the exact same kettle I used in France because I bought it in France, in Finland, and here in Italy. Yet I had never seen these deposits before. Or rather, maybe, after a whole month, and then you give it a treatment or something, you clean it thoroughly. I just use vinegar, some soap and water, boil it and then clean it and so on. But here, I should be doing it every other day because the residue is disgusting. I don't know if I will have the courage to show you an actual picture because it's embarrassing, and I'm telling you, not even 48 hours. And then I have to clean it thoroughly again with the whole treatment. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be cleaning your kettle, but in Finland it wasn't needed, not as much. And to be honest, not even in France, where I used that kettle for the first time. I used it for 3 months. Never had to clean it thoroughly to remove limescale. This is one thing that it's obvious because you can see the residues. But that's why Finnish water tasted like nothing to me, because I was so used to this heavy kind of water that I'm sure it also affects your hair, for example, when you wash yourself, maybe your skin when you take a shower. I'm not sure because I never noticed that specifically, but I know that it affects some people more. This might sound unrelated to you, but since I have a whole YouTube channel about cinema, these two things go together in my head. I watched a movie, I will show you the details here, that is a Finnish movie, and it was precisely about an absolutely logical fear of losing access to clean water. Because water is so important in Finland, and they know how valuable it is. This is basically a dystopia. So they made this sci-fi movie in which water is managed by a few, and that's the most important resource on the planet. And I mean, isn't it the most important resource on the planet? Anyways, yes it is, yet a lot of countries don't seem to give it the respect that is due, Okay, this video will be a bit rambly because my brain keeps jumping here and there from one point to the other because that's how my brain works, and I didn't really script this video at all. because it's all based around this comment by this person, and it made me think about a lot of things. One is this movie. Brilliant idea. The movie is a bit slow, so unless you're Finnish, you might find it difficult to follow. But I do recommend it if you love anything post-apocalyptic, a dystopia, sci-fi in general, or niche, or even independent movies, because this was the overall feel I got from it, even though I don't know if it's independent or not. But if you're into this topic, maybe watch it, because it's interesting, an interesting take on the issue. But I found quite revealing the fact that Finns made this movie. It could have been even, I don't know, Danes, Norwegians, Swedes, I'm not sure, but it sounds more likely than Americans. Because, as I said, they truly value water. In my apartment in Finland, I didn't have to pay for water separately. It was just part of the rent, so I didn't really know how much I would pay for water each month, so I wouldn't know about that. But I know for sure that the water that I got was the cleanest possible thing in the country. Whereas if you want to get properly clean water in Italy, you have to climb a mountain or to visit a town, a village, something, a cottage up in the mountains. And that's the best water you can get. Otherwise, there are so many cities, and this is surprising to me because it never affected me directly. In the places I lived in, Trieste, I never needed to buy bottled water. But there are so many cities in Italy in which you cannot do anything else. You have to, because water may not be toxic, and we will get to that, but it's not as clean or as healthy for you to drink repeatedly. And this might be shocking to you. It's shocking to me as an Italian. And we're not even getting into the whole climate change aspect. There are some regions or certain cities that are suffering more in Italy because of this, and year after year you hear on the news that they have to limit the amount of bottled water you buy per family because there's scarcity. This is scary as hell, in my humble opinion, but I know that people who live in those places, some of them might not be taking it as seriously, probably because they got used to this, I don't know. But having to buy bottled water is not normal. It shouldn't be normal. And now let me give you another example, because this person replied to me in the comment section of that video saying that they lived in other places as well, so they're familiar with the fact that there are so many different conditions in which people live in terms of access to clean water in the place where they live. Okay, we're not even talking about, I don't know, restaurants or something. And yes, I briefly mentioned to this person one example that is a key example in my life, because we're just talking about my experience. We're not talking about research, facts. There are so many YouTube channels dedicated to that. Actually, I have a couple of recommendations if you're into this, because I know for a fact that they do the research and this is their field. It's not my field, so I'm not even trying. Okay, so just take it as my personal experience and feel free to share yours. It's not something that I can deny or you can deny if it's a personal experience. But I wanted to share this because it's something that has been stuck with me for so long, because it's something that I believe it should make people think, because it certainly did that to me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few years back, I lived for a short period in East Africa, first in Tanzania and then in Kenya, for a very short period in Kenya. But that's the period I remember the most, precisely because the approach to water was so radical and radically different from everything I had experienced before that I have to tell you about this. I hope now things are different. I'm not familiar with the current situation. Don't take it as gospel or something. As I said, it was just my experience in that period. I lived in Mombasa for a bit, and I lived in an apartment, I don't know, 3rd, 4th, 5th floor or something. And I arrived in Mombasa after a period in Tanzania. I stayed in a house in which we had a filter So a whole machine that people could use, they could come to our place and use it to get clean water. And that machine must have been extremely expensive because nobody had it. So it was a lucky situation. That doesn't mean that all the water we had at home was clean. No, if we needed to take a shower, we still had to use what I call the toxic water, meaning water that is not drinkable, but that probably contains contaminants that you wouldn't find in Europe. So it was toxic to me, for sure, but others simply call it regular water or something, not clean enough to drink or to cook with. When I moved to Mombasa, I found a different situation. In that apartment, there were two taps. From one tap, we could only get salted water. And I mean seawater from the sea, not desalinated, no, seawater with the salt in it, okay? Just so it's super clear. That was the regular water we could get on a daily basis. In the bathroom, in the kitchen, we always had two different taps, but one wouldn't work. The water was made available through that tap only once every 2 weeks, I believe. More or less regularly, it wasn't super strict. You knew that at some point you would get that second kind of water and you would have to stock up. Why? Because the second one was this kind of toxic water. Pass me the term, I don't know how else I can call it, but it's a kind of water that you shouldn't be using to clean your vegetables, for example. Even though there are some tricks. If you've ever been to Africa or East Africa, you might have used these tricks. For example, if you wash the dishes with that toxic water and you dry them immediately, there are fewer chances for you to get sick. Stuff like that. I'm not even sure how it worked, and I don't think we could do that on veggies, for example, to wash the veggies. I don't remember. But either way, you wouldn't eat raw veggies. You would always cook them, and you wouldn't eat the skin anyways. For example, for zucchini or tomatoes or something, you would always have to remove it and cook the veggies. So I don't really remember if we did use the toxic water for that. Either way, that water wasn't available on a daily basis. We would have to collect it in a tank at home. And that's the other problem. If we didn't clean the tank regularly and make sure that the water was used by the time that the new water would get to our place, we would risk another kind of contamination, the simple fact that that became stagnant water. But that water could be used to do the laundry, which wasn't really possible with the salted water. Or rather, you could do that, but clothes would break easily. You can only wash your things a number of times before it's completely broken by the salt in the water. But I remember there were some things that we couldn't wait for the other water, or it wasn't as manageable, and so we had to use salted water no matter what. For example, to take the shower. We only had a certain amount of water we could use every day. And the other thing I remember was the toilet. So since the water in the toilet was always salted, there was a mark left by the salt itself. And that residue was impossible to remove. First of all, you didn't have any water to waste for that kind of thing. Second of all, it's so difficult to clean your toilet regularly and to remove salt regularly from the toilet because the deposit was too heavy. I mean, it was a clean toilet, usable, but if you looked at it and you didn't know what that was, you would be concerned. There were things like that. Or, for example, when I took showers with the salted water, since I was staying for a short period, I could risk it, let's say. But I remember that after the shower, I was never fully clean. I cannot tell you exactly what's the process, but that water wasn't properly cleaning anything. And so I had to use micellar water because I still had a little bottle of it, to do my skincare. And that was the best way for me to clean my face rather than relying on the shower. And I know this might sound like TMI. I know, but we're talking about something that everybody should have access to. and we all need it. We all end up having to pay for it. Because you might be wondering at this point, okay, you had salted water, you had toxic water. How the heck did you manage to survive? Yes, the third type of water was one we had to buy in a tank of 10 liters, I think, each. For this one, I have a picture. I didn't take videos, photos, or anything of this place for privacy reasons and other things, but I do have a photo of that little tank that we had to buy, I think, every other day or something. We were just two people living in that place in that moment. And that water was strictly for drinking, cooking, brushing our teeth. And as I said, I don't really remember how we cleaned our veggies, possibly with this water or with the other method. But you see, two people, 10 liters. And I don't remember the price. If I have it, I will share it. But either way, it's an expense. And I remember the struggle to open those tanks. Oh my god. Well, now I couldn't do it because I'm hypermobile. But even the other person who was living in that place found a way, like we had to use a knife and then we would risk cutting ourselves because it was so difficult to open. It was a whole mess. And then you would also give back that tank. So in a way, okay, you're at least not wasting that much plastic. This was the system, okay? 3 types of water. You might be wondering, why don't you have regular access to that toxic water? There were some speculations rather than facts because I never knew or I never investigated enough to learn about how it actually works. But Mombasa is an island, even though if you look at it from the map, it might look like it's inside the continent, on the land, but no, it's surrounded by water. And being an island, what they do is they simply take water directly from the ground, and that water is salted because it's on the sea. But they don't do any process to remove salt from it, I guess because it's expensive and it's not their priority. So that's the water that everybody gets if they have running water at home. That's not even a given, of course. But the toxic water, you might think, why only twice a month? What's the point? And only for maybe one day, I think. Could have been 24 hours or 48 hours of toxic water, long enough to do the laundry, save some of that water in the tank, in the big tank, and that was about it. I only saw that toxic water once when I was staying there. And then the water you have to pay for separately, and that depends on you, of course, the quantity. But we had to take it upstairs for 4 or 5 stories. I don't remember exactly. I remember it was heavy. We often had to be 2 people carrying that tank, but it was a struggle, of course. That's one of the reasons why, at least in the African countries I've been to, you end up buying sodas instead because they are cheaper. If you're looking for something that can be refreshing, usually they don't store water in fridges. You tend to find sodas rather than water, and they may be safer because it's easier to check if the bottle was open or not. There's a whole thing, you know. If you've ever traveled to Africa, you are familiar with these things. If you haven't ever left Finland, for example, you might not know. These are quite common when you're traveling the country or the whole continent. In this case, we're talking about Kenya, but the countries I can talk about in these terms are Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. In houses, I always had a slightly different situation in apartments, houses, hotels, and so on. But rest assured that if you want clean water, you likely have to purchase it in bottles, in restaurants, stores, and so on. When I first learned about this whole system, I was wondering, yes, as I told you, why only twice per month? And I don't have a final answer, but basically the government or the local government, or what's it called, I don't know, had that kind of power. They decided when to release that water. Based on what, I don't know. This means that that water was somewhere, it was accessible in theory, because I'm pretty sure hotels don't have this kind of problem. They never run out of decent water. We're talking about apartments, people living there, residents. My other question was, okay, so we don't have an answer for why they do it. I don't have an answer. Draw your conclusions. But the second thought was, why does Kenya have 5G and the latest smartphone, but they don't have access to clean water? Because everywhere I went, even in the smallest village, even in the most remote location where I went, it took me hours to travel to a certain place or something. They still had data, a proper smartphone, and most likely a better smartphone than the one that I had. If you can get access to modernity, to progress, technological progress, why can't you get desalinated water? Why can't you provide, because at this point it's the government or whoever is in charge, why can't you provide not even clean, but the toxic kind of water to your citizens? And if you're a citizen, why can't you ask for it? I don't know, I won't get into politics or anything. I mean, there are so many things that Italians don't even bother to protest for or to request via referendum or something. So this is what I'm trying to say. It's not their fault specifically. It's true that so many cities, as I told you, I could give you a list. But why don't these Italian cities protest to get clean water, just as they are not doing or they weren't doing back then in Kenya? And why do you care more about having the latest whatever smartphone it is? Yes, you can survive, you can find ways around it. As I told you, you can purchase it and you can have access to water as long as you can carry it upstairs and buy it, basically, if you can afford it. This is a matter of priorities, in my opinion. This discussion can apply to Finland versus Italy too, because Finland actively decided to invest in a system that would provide clean water for all. And if you don't have running water, it's because it's designed like that, because it's a cottage so remote that it doesn't have access to electricity, water, and if you're a Finn, you know. If you're not a Finn, you may not know that this is exciting for them, because it's something that you can find in a mökki. And it makes sense if you are looking for it, if you're going, I don't know, camping, if you're searching for adventure. I get it. Then you are prepared, you bring your own water, and you know what you are going for. Whereas here we're talking about access in your home, in the place that should feel safe. I don't know, it might make zero sense to you, this whole discussion, maybe because you never faced these problems, maybe because you always gave this for granted. You never even thought that, okay, your country is doing a better job at this. Maybe it's thanks to politics, maybe it's thanks to, I don't know, the local community, whatever it might be, I don't know. And I'm still shocked, yes, that certain apartments in Trieste have access to clean water, even though it's this heavy type, and others don't. And so you have to install a filter or something, or you end up buying bottled water. And there's a whole problem with that. Buying plastic bottles is avoidable in this case, or it could be avoidable if only someone cared. As you can tell, it's frustrating to me. Maybe because I finally lived in a country where this is so obvious. Actually, in two countries. So the two extremes are these examples that I'm giving you, Finland and Kenya. But Italy is not doing well, or is right in the middle, It could be so much better, yet I cannot complain. I personally cannot complain, but other people should. Could. So sorry for the rumble. I believe it's an important topic. And this person in the comment section truly reminded me that I do care about this topic. And yes, I noticed how different water is and how easily you get used to clean water. You truly give it for granted after a while. Until at some point it's, I don't know, for example, when one day they're doing some renovations or something, they take away water from you, or a few months back in Spain and Portugal, maybe. There was something with probably electricity. So they ran out of power, and I think as a consequence, they wouldn't get access to water or something, you know? So it wasn't strictly water related. But we should all be prepared for that situation because we rely too heavily on electricity in Europe. And this is a whole other can of worms, you say, because electricity and specifically power cuts in, well, the latest I experienced were in Ethiopia, but I had the same in Kenya and in Tanzania. They're a whole other discussion, and yeah, if you want, we can discuss it in another video. But this was one of those situations in which people in Spain weren't necessarily prepared because they relied on the system. It's supposed to work and that's it. And unless you are, I don't know, a survivalist, you say, or someone who is prepared for disasters. And there's something I told them about how well people are prepared in Finland when it comes to disasters, but it's something you don't think about, or you don't really know how to behave when that kind of emergency happens. Maybe it's a power cut and you don't right away, you don't think of, oh, but I should stock up on water, or I should take goods out of the fridge or something. And we are talking about an emergency. But this happens when you are too used to something that, yes, it works and it's good that it works. But you should know, you should be aware, this is what I'm trying to say, you should be aware of the privilege, but also, if you don't have access to all of this, you should know that you can fight for it. You should be fighting for it. You should have access to clean water, no matter who you are, where you live. I'm sorry if it sounds a bit aggressive. I don't mean it towards you or anything. It's just, yes, it's true. It's another culture shock that I wasn't expecting to experience coming back from Finland to Italy. And this, once again, it reminded me of this strong experience, memorable experience that I had in Kenya, and I mean in Tanzania, in Ethiopia as well. Yeah. But let me know what you think about this. Have you ever experienced this kind of emergency or traveling? Or have you ever moved to a country in which the water situation, the distribution of water was so different that you really had to adapt, and it became a task, a daily task that you had never planned to add to your routine? Let me know, because I'm really curious. And once again, since it's a personal experience that I'm sharing here, there's no need to be rude or insult anybody. If I don't know something, just tell me about it kindly. That's the way, or that's the best way to do it. Either way, I have a lot more culture shocks to share. Actually, I had already planned another video about this, but this sounded more interesting or urgent in a way. So I will share them later on. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss my upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.